BHP and China, what is going on? Hi everyone and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, welcome back Katrina. She's been looking at this issue. We've got BHP on one side, China on the other side. Seems to be quite confrontational, a lot of, I'm not really sure what's going on, but we've got you here today to get to the bottom of it. How are you going today, Katrina?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, Chris. How are you going?
Yeah, not too bad. Now, like I said, I'm not really that sure what's going on. I see the headlines and I'm going,
Yeah.
what's really going on here? So talk us through, what's this dispute about?
It's one that I think is definitely one to watch at the moment. Obviously, we've seen tension between Australia and China with our trade in the past, but obviously this is a big one. So obviously we have China, which is one of our largest purchasers of iron ore. They've basically said that they are banning the purchase of iron ore from BHP after contract negotiations basically stalled and fell through. So they are they were wanting certain obviously pricing, certain things in the contract, and I think BHP, it has been reported that BHP was quite, they gave them a lot of leeway, in their contract. And basically, the iron ore that was supposed to be, they were supposed to discuss and get that contract through. It was on the ship ready to be sent over to China. So that's also halted as a result of these pricing negotiations. And obviously, we're seeing issues with the dollar, obviously the Chinese currency. It's come a lot into play, and they're obviously wanting a better deal. And they just said they're going to not purchase, and they're putting a blanket ban on our Australian iron ore until this resorts itself.
So why is it so important? Is it
Mm,
that it's such a major export for us? Is it, I would have thought from the Chinese perspective that
mm.
it's quite an important import from their side as well. So, you know, I wouldn't think it's a one-sided negative impact of that sort of ban.
It's a great question because it is a really large export for us here in Australia. Obviously, China uses our iron ore. They buy it from us. They manufacture and they've got their steel that they need it for, and then they also send it back to us. So it is a quite a strange agreement to some extent, but it's a really large export for us, and it's something that in the past has been brought up as a concern because we are really heavily reliant and dependent on China buying our iron ore. I've got a stat here that it's basically China is our biggest customer. It's basically 80% of our Australian iron
Really?
ore
Yeah.
exports go straight to China. So having this news come out, it's really quite shocked people. It's making people feel sort of afraid or scared as to what's going on. Obviously, we have the foundation of our economic exports. And I think that we have spoken about it before, but obviously wine, we've got metal, and
Yeah.
iron ore is a massive one. And we depend on China for a lot of those trade exports too. So um, I think it's quite interesting to see that this has become headline news because I do believe it needs to be, because when we're talking about our economic security in Australia and what we produce and what we can export, that obviously goes towards our GDP. We need to make sure that we have effective trade measures that in the event that something were to stop, we don't rely on one whole
Mm.
country. So, yeah.
And that has been a global issue that more people are
Mm,
talking about now, is that sort of dependence of globalization where you're dependent on every other country.
yeah.
That's all fine when it's working, but when there's these conflicts, it creates a problem. Is it
Yeah.
who's driving this? Is it the Chinese
Mm.
government itself? Are there other players involved? What's the, like, who are the main players here?
Well, I think the government does have quite a bit of say, but we're talking about obviously specifically between BHP and CMRG, which is a Chinese state-backed company that is involved in these negotiations with BHP. It is basically, it was formed to centralize and stabilize their power in this trade agreement.
Mm.
And so I find that interesting in itself, because obviously it was set up so it could globally dominate that iron ore market. It's responsible for all the negotiating contracts.
Yeah.
So we don't know obviously who, what, where, but we know that the company as a whole was set up for those purposes, and we know that obviously it is involved in all the negotiations, and it's going to use its political power for its advantage. And we see it here today when obviously they've halted the iron ore that's literally on the ship ready to go to China. They're not taking it because they're not agreeing to the negotiations that they've undertaken. And we know that basically, obviously, they're a large consumer of iron ore, but it's a really big, big company that is state backed. And I just want to make it clear too that there are a lot of people coming out saying that they're quite frustrated, and I think they're quite scared, and there's a lack of confidence with the Australian government to stand up to these sorts of issues. So it's just something to keep in mind. But yeah, it's a massive company that I think is overtaking a lot of the iron ore market.
And you also, when we were sort of talking about this before, you mentioned there's a specific mine
Mm.
in play here that's part of this dispute. Can you talk us through that angle?
Yes, so it is the Simandou mine. Now, I don't know if I've pronounced that correctly, so please forgive me, but we're talking about the mine that's in Guinea in West Africa, and it's basically a key factor of basically the backdrop of the dispute. So it is expected to produce about 120 million tons annually once it's fully operational, and China has invested multi-millions of dollars basically into this mine to diversify its iron ore supply away from Australia.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm concerned about. A lot of political analysts and business analysts have come out and basically said that the ban is basically a power play for China. And they're more confident than ever basically exerting that pressure over BHP because they've got this mine in West Africa. And they're going to leverage that. They're going to say, well, we don't need your iron ore. We don't need this close relationship. You need us, but we don't need you.
Yeah.
And I think that this should be a wake up call to everybody. And it's not just about China, it's about our exports, our dependency on other countries. We as a nation are a very resource rich nation. And we need to use that to our advantage, but we don't need to be dependent on one key player, in my personal opinion.
Mm.
Um, and with this mine coming out, I mean, BHP is probably just going like, what are we going to do? They don't have to use us all the time in the future. They're going to go to West Africa to get their iron ore. Obviously, we know about the One Belt, One Road, and we know a lot of the African nations have signed that agreement as well. So there are, strong economic ties going from Africa and China. So we just need to keep an eye on that here in Australia and understand that we need to diversify also who we're exporting to
Yeah.
um, as a result of this as well.
Yeah, that does sound quite concerning that we're
Yeah.
behind the ball here. That when that mine, for example, has been set up, there's signs there we should be looking for ahead of time. We shouldn't be reactive after the fact because we should be able to see that coming. Really, you would think.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I also think too, we do have many different departments here in Australia. And I know if you are selling a property or a big farming, you know, big farming land or cattle stations in certain states, you have to go through a tender process, particularly if there are overseas buyers that are
Mm.
wanting to offer a price, for the property. I know this is a little bit different, but in saying that, I do think our departments do need to take a look at who is investing in us, who we're investing in, who's exporting, what are we doing? Because, like you said, we can't just take action when the iron ore's on the ship and they don't want it to go there. We need to take action prior to that, and we need to have things put in place to protect our economic security.
So to wrap this up, what are the implications here if you think about
Mm.
BHP specifically, but also the broader market, the broader Australian market at least? Is this the start of a trend perhaps? How do you view it?
I mean, it's quite concerning in my personal opinion. We've seen it before with our alcohol and our wine, when there was massive tension between Australia and China a couple of years ago, and we had exports of wine just sitting on the ships for months, because they couldn't negotiate on a price, and there were different things going on. So it is really concerning. I do also just want to note too, obviously we're talking about the implications for BHP, but as the market opened, when all this information came out, their shares fell by 2% instantly.
Yep.
So, I mean, investors are concerned. We have people that are concerned for a whole number of reasons, but in terms of BHP specifically, I think people are concerned, and they're um, concerned also by the lack of maybe government support. So they feel as though, with this new mine in Guinea, it's really a give or take. What is China actually going to do?
Mm.
We've seen obviously also potential revenue loss, and there's obviously a lot of uncertainty around one of BHP's biggest customers. Um, I do want to also note that BHP has already reported downfalls of about 26% year on year due to the falling in iron ore and coal prices, and basically a real halt in purchasing of our Australian iron ore could lead to a significant amount of oversupply, which then
Yep. Keeps
the
that price
price will.
lower again. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, the price is just going to tank. So, it is a quite an aggressive stance. In my opinion, from China, when they know they're buying 80% of our iron ore, and they're wanting all those negotiations. I think it highlights a lot of vulnerabilities in our economic standpoint in Australia, and how we're going to go from here, and obviously not be so resource dependent on one buyer. But I think BHP has a long road ahead, if this is the case, and there's going to be a whole nother mine, that they're looking to purchase from. I don't see how this is going to be great for them. We've seen the share price fall, and I think we might see some further things come to fruition, if they can't get these negotiations done.
And such a major part of our sort of stock market as well. When you think
Yeah.
about how BHP's has been for a very long time a big player there. So yeah,
Mm.
it is something to be watching. Look, thank you so much for your analysis of that today. We'll bring you back to look at that again in the future. I think to see how it unfolds, because it is an important part of our market generally, and as we sort of highlighted, and if there are implications for further impacts of that, it will be one certainly to watch. So thank you for your work on that.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.